Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here. Special guest star today, Lamont Pope from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. He's here to hang out a little bit. Everybody else is in Hoover, Alabama. Basically, everyone's down. Jeremy Price obviously we sent down to do that game. Zach Osterman is also from inside Indiana, who we usually drag onto this thing, or who really drags himself onto this thing. Hi Zach. Is in Hoover as well, and everybody else is doing high school games. Mike Miller and Andy Graham and the whole bit. So Lamont has agreed to step in and pinch hit for all of them. We're thankful for his services.
Anytime.
But anyway, Indiana, another blowout. Not that you expected anything different. They beat Central Connecticut State 100-69. But this one obviously a little bit different, a little bit some heavy heart stuff a little bit today. Austin Etherington went down with an apparent knee injury, an apparent really bad knee injury. It's hard to tell. They weren't able to tell us yet exactly what it is. It's a left knee injury, but they haven't been able to really, I guess, scope it out yet, simply because there's a lot of swelling, there's a lot of pain. It takes a while before you can go to get do an MRI on an injury like that. But that one was tough to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, right away you can tell just how serious it was. I mean, it was playing defense back underneath the basket, went on down, and immediately he was screaming and in some serious pain. And as you can tell, eventually the players went on over once they got him up on a stretcher, and all the players and all the coaches were there showing some support, and it was a good sign for him to give a little wave to the crowd as he was leaving.
Through the number one up, yeah. No, I mean, it was. We went back. We were just watching it on replay in the press room. Apparently, he knocked knees with Terrell Allen. Terrell Allen, the Central Connecticut State kind of swingman, was just kind of driving forward, and Austin stepped in to try to take a charge after he just missed a couple of free throws, and I guess he was just trying to make a play over there, and it just seemed like. It seemed like they knocked knees, and also then he got his foot stepped on. That's what it looked like to me. It was tough to read because basically every shot you see is kind of from behind. It was just an awkward angle the way they sort of made contact and sort of bumped into each other. It wasn't a full-on collision by any means, but there was just enough contact where it just seemed Etherington's left leg just got hit weird in two different sort of directions. And he came down and he was grabbing at it immediately. And if you listen to the replay or if you were there, I mean the noises he makes are bad. It's definitely not the sort of thing that you want to hear. But you mentioned the support, and I thought that was really touching, honestly, to see a group of guys. I mean, it didn't seem like they were waiting on a signal to go do it. It's just once the doctors, Larry Rink and Tim Garl and all those guys were out there, and Dr. Alfeld as well, we're all about to pick him up and put him on the stretcher, and as soon as they were getting ready to do that, the whole team just ran out there and just surrounded him, and I don't know how many guys actually had to help him, onto the stretcher, but that didn't seem like it was the point of it. It seemed like obviously they wanted to give a little bit of support that way, but most of it was just to be, just to kind of pat him on the back and say, Austin, you're going to be okay, and really kind of to comfort themselves. I mean, it seemed like it took them all a while. They all seemed, legitimately shaken up, and when you see an injury like that, it's tough. But I think it was another kind of example of just how connected, how tight this team is.
And that's what Tom Crean mentioned during the post-game news conference. Is just this is a very tight-knit group, and it's part of the reason why the team has had some of the success that it's had this season. It's just how close and how much these guys, as he said, all through the recruiting process, and then obviously, on the day-to-day basis as well. And he said that these guys are all friends, and that's part of the reason why the team has had some success. And so, and it really did show during that moment of a crisis situation that everyone was able to come together and be there for Austin.
Yeah, and they mentioned the recruiting thing. Obviously, we've talked about Austin's contributions. I mean, he hasn't done a ton on the court at this point. But again, I mean, as we said a bunch of times, I mean, you don't know how critical any of this is because obviously these guys make decisions for themselves. But Austin Etherington was the guy who was recruiting Cody Zeller. He was recruiting Yogi Ferrell. He was recruiting Hana Perea. Was doing a lot of just individual work on his own while he was still a commitment from Hamilton Heights. Just trying to get those guys to come along with him, and you don't know how much he did to, how much convincing there was. I mean, it seemed like Cody Zeller certainly was going to make his own decision regardless of what anybody else said, but you had to think that made at least some degree of difference, the degree of hustle he put into that, and he's one of the more, just definitely a well-liked kid, and it's definitely a tough loss for them. It doesn't really kill him in any way. There's nothing that they necessarily can't do without him. It seemed like they were just trying to work him in and find places for him to play, but it's still a tough loss, for those guys, and still tough to see a guy go down. You don't know how long it's going to be, and maybe he wakes up tomorrow and it's just a sprain, but I'd be shocked. I mean, the way it looked, the way he came out and just they ran him to the hospital immediately. I mean, that, everything you've seen covering the sport or watching the sport tells you that's probably a tear. But you don't. I mean, again, you don't know. I mean, no one's made it official yet. It just doesn't look good. But other than that, just another complete, really thorough domination. I mean, it seemed like that threw them off their game a little bit, and there was some sloppiness. I think that could at least be partially attributable to that, but it didn't really matter. They were just able to just kind of run roughshod over Central Connecticut State. A couple impressive stats. Christian Watford had 21. I thought it was a big night for him, basically, just because he has not played particularly well recently. It seemed like he got his flow again today.
Yeah, and he got it going early on. 5 quick points right out of the gate, and that just sort of set the tone for him throughout the night. Able to get those, he got to hit the first jumper, and then he had a 3-pointer, and it just sort of set the tone for him the entire evening.
He needed to hit some shots. I mean, he was having a tough time getting any to fall, especially obviously the North Carolina game when he was 1 for 9. It was a little bit better against Coppin State, but not a lot. I think he was 3 for 8 in that game, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that vicinity. But yeah, he hit a couple threes. He hit one early off a kick out from somebody. It was just a wide open 3, and it just seemed like, okay, I've got it. I can do this again. Now, partially, they were able to be pretty dominant tonight, Cody Zeller and Christian Watford both, because Central Connecticut State didn't start a player over 6'6" and didn't play a player over 6'8", so those guys were able to kind of, impose will and stuff like that, but it was still pretty impressive. Zeller, again, 19 and 19. That's ridiculous.
As Tom said, it's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, just an incredible figure, 19 points, 19 rebounds. We joked about it while watching the game. It was like, can he get to 2020? I mean, it was, and for him to get 19-19 is just a remarkable night.
He was pretty close to it. And again, he played really well and he was dominant, but it was also a case of this is what happens when other teams just don't have any answer for him. I mean, and there's going to be nights like that, and there's still probably going to be nights like that in the Big Ten. But that's a situation of saying you can't stop me. And those guys, they got on the ball, but he rebounded phenomenally well. He just used the fact that he's 7 feet tall, and just use it just to again impose will and just dominate. But a guy who did that probably as much as anybody, Victor Oladipo, has just been phenomenal.
Particularly defensive.
He's been off the charts. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, just particularly defensively. I mean, obviously he got the big assignment tonight. He and Will as well, and they were able. They were just able to facing the guy.
Calvin Alice, who was averaging 25.9, goes 3 for 15 with 7 points.
And you can visibly see just how frustrated he was throughout the night because these guys were up on him every single time and made it just a very, very difficult night for him. Oladipo and it's obviously transferred on over to his offense. He put on a show offensively as well.
He absolutely did.
I mean,
the posterizing dunk, my God. I think there was 2 that'll stand out in one way or another, but the big one was it might have been Terrell Allen.
Yes,
I think
is
what it was. Terrell Allen, who later runs into Austin Etherton, but Oladipo just dunked over top of him. And I mean, the athleticism is just off the charts what that kid can do. But defensively, I mean, when he causes his own fast breaks. I mean, that's the big thing is he had 5 steals, he had 3 blocks. I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5" guy. I mean, he's probably 6'4". At the end of the day, when they measure him for the NBA, he'll probably be 6'4". And he just got up that high and just swatted 3 of those. But 5 steals was all over Vanales, and most of those big dunks are because he just had all the court in the world to work with and time to run and think, basically, and think, what am I going to do? He had the one, I think he wanted to be a little bit more spectacular. It was sort of, I guess, a 180. That's kind of reverse dunk where he just kind of jumped across the hoop and then turned around and threw it down backwards. But I think he wanted that one to be a little bit more spectacular than it was. But it didn't really matter. I mean, he was just all over the place. How hard is it just to deal with him at this point? I mean, if you're an opposing offense and you're trying to get anything done, how hard is it just to deal with Victor Oladipo?
Well, I mean, what the Central Connecticut State coach said in his post game, he said, where'd you find this guy?
Yeah.
I mean, just everything that he's able to do. I mean, he creates havoc on both ends of the court, and he's just a lot of fun for the fans to watch, a lot of fun for us to watch. But yeah, for opposing teams preparing for him, just going to cause headaches every single time on out.
And for as tough a night as tonight was for this team, Oladipo was cracking us up in press conference, and he always does. But he was hysterical tonight, and he kept talking about. Somebody asked him about who he defends in practice, who he deals with in practice, and he told somebody, sometimes I guard Cody, and sometimes I guard Watford. And Watford was just sitting there, just being like, you don't do good against Cody. He says, you don't do good against me. And Oladipo's like, don't believe them. Don't believe them. What do you think? But he was pretty classic. He called it a feathery situation that Peter Jerkin and Hunter Pereira are going to come back. That's one of Vic's words. Feathery is one of his favorite. If you follow him on Twitter, you know that. That's one of his favorites. And the know us thing, of course, is Vic Staples. But he was bringing them all out tonight, basically. Even on a tough night for this team, for this program, to probably lose a kid for a while in Austin Etherington, Vic still made everybody laugh. And also made Indiana win. But all right, thanks everybody. Check in tomorrow. Jeremy Price will be all over the College Cup. We'll be all over Indiana's men's soccer team's running at an 8th star with Georgetown tomorrow. So stick around for that. And thanks everybody. Thanks again, Lamont Pope.
Thanks for having me.